It's recording. All right. Hello, everyone. Cordell Davenport here with Small Apartment Investors. And this is my second go around where I'm bringing across someone who can be very beneficial to you and I. And I said before is that my vision of coming up with these shows is not just to, hey, let me find somebody new. I want to have a core focus of people who really know what they're doing, that can be able to teach and have a message to say. And so once again, those people are going to be a real estate attorney, a mortgage broker, a property manager, and a real estate attorney. Did I say that? I think I screwed them up.
Yep. No, you did. Yeah. Real estate attorney. You got it.
Yeah. So anyhow, what I try to do, my ultimate goal, everyone, is to own and manage a small apartment portfolio. And it's funny that I met Fernando. Is like, I am kind of following his steps, not knowing I'm following his steps. I listened to an interview with him, learned some stuff about him, got him on Instagram, and listened to his messages. And so a lot of things that I'm trying to do is, as I learn, you guys all learn. And on smallapartmentinvestors.com, I have this free ebook, Have Your Family Living Expenses Covered by Small Apartments You Own. And guess what? That's my goal. And I know that if anything, it's all about mindset. So mindset plus skill set plus performance equals results. And when it comes to property management, that's a huge portion of skill set. There's a lot to know and a lot to learn. So what I'm going to do is going to read his little brief bio, and we're going to learn some more about his message, his tactics, and how we can all benefit. So Francis bought his first income property in 2003 with no formal training or experience in real estate. By 2006, he started a property management business that grew to operate 40 million in residential multifamily and represented prestigious clients such as Wells Fargo, California National Bank, and U.S. Bank. He is the author of a trademark book titled Job Plus Real Estate Equals Wealth. I have that book, FYI, that serves as a guide on how to invest in multifamily properties while working full time. Today, after selling his property management business, Francis is a sought-after real estate coach and speaker that helps new and seasoned real estate investors start and grow their portfolios. He also helps real estate agents become authority figures in their community by creating sales funnels that nurture and convert into sales. Francis also works at auction.com, the largest marketplace of distressed real estate. He coordinates and helps the auctioning of foreclosed properties. Francis is a graduate of University of Buffalo. We earned his Bachelor of Science and Master of Science in Electrical and Computer Engineering. Francis is a dad of two incredible sons, a husband, a yogi and fitness enthusiast, and lives in Buffalo, New York, where it's cold. And I'm in California, where it's about 80.
Oh, man. I know. And it's getting colder. Every day that goes by, it's getting colder. Although this week, we do have a nice, warm week. So very much like your warm welcome here, Cordell. I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So we can, I just read the bio, but what else is it about you, like your story? Because it's a unique story, and I know that you didn't plan this route. Right. I know your background more than other people. So why don't you break it down?
Sure. I'll break it down, Cordell, by sort of talking about my mantra, right? And mantras don't come in as part of who you are as a being. I mean, there are certain mantras about your personality that you hang tight to, like your values. Mm-hmm. But I'm going to step away from values for a second and talk a little bit about the journey, and then I'll tie it back into what my actual journey is. But my mantra as it pertains to real estate is, I call it hashtag how much will I make, right? And the reason for that is it sounds like it's driven purely on how much money I will make. And yes, that is a component, but it's more a higher level look into it, saying, if I am going to get involved in real estate, or if I'm going to get involved in a business, or if I'm going to get involved in any kind of entrepreneurial endeavor, am I looking back and breaking that transaction and that deal apart from the infrastructure, right? So from an infrastructure perspective, do I have what it takes to take care of or get into that endeavor? Right? Can I facilitate that with the current status and current involvements that I'm doing right now, with my family involvements, with my current job? Can I actually take that on? Or am I getting into a headache where I'm going to get involved and then like blow up because I just can't logistically take care of it? And the reason that's important to me is because as I look back at my journey, I went through those kind of situations. I had a job, I got involved in real estate, and I logistically blew up a little bit in my real estate portfolio because I didn't have the infrastructure to take care of those. Mm-hmm. So as I look back, they say, hindsight 2020, right? Mm-hmm. I look back and I go, wow, I wish I knew what I know today. I wish I knew that when I got into real estate. And so that's really what the mantra is. So it's not as much as it sounds like it's all about making money. Really, that hashtag, how much will I make, is really how much of how much do I know? Is my brain going to learn by getting involved in this? Okay. So that's, and then I'm going to tie it into a little bit of my journey. So really, really at a high level, I'm an engineer by profession. I became an engineer because I come from a family of engineers. My dad was an engineer. We traveled around the globe. My dad worked in various mines, copper mines in Central Africa, Southeast Asia, and then eventually in Canada. And then, I moved to the US. So that was sort of in my blood. Engineer, but I always say I was an engineer up here, not down here. Mm-hmm. I think I had the want and desire to become a business person or an entrepreneur, but I didn't really know how to do it. So my first kind of leap into it, my first formal, I had a few informal leaps into business, but my first formal leap into business as it pertains to real estate was in 2003. I had moved from Buffalo, New York to New Hampshire. My 9-to-5 job, I was an engineer at Verizon. My 9-to-5 job moved me out to New Hampshire. And I loved the area. There was something unique about that area. It was a little bit north of Boston. Real estate prices were a tad bit cheaper than the big metropolis of mm-hmm. Boston. So all your investors were coming from Boston, unable to buy in Boston and buying up north in Manchester, New Hampshire. Okay. And at the time, I found it attractive to buy real estate. So I was using my corporate cash, saving it up. And I was always one to buy assets. I had read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I had learned the difference between an asset versus a liability. And that was kind of a, wake up moment for me. So I was using that money buying assets, which my choice was larger apartment buildings, but larger per the definition of your show, it's smaller. So it's not the single families and it's not the two families, but I was more attracted to the 5 to 6 to 8 unit. That was my sweet spot. So actually, I will redefine that: smaller apartment complexes. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was doing. I was buying up smaller apartment complexes. I got to a point where I had 22 units. My portfolio size has changed here and there. 22 units. And I got logistically stuck. And I'll expand on that later as we get into the show, but logistically stuck in the sense, couldn't manage my job and I couldn't manage the assets. So I decided to take a leap of faith and go, my first entrepreneurial venture outside of buying the real estate was to start a property management company to manage those assets.
You need to be a real estate agent in that area to be a property manager?
Yeah. So it's depending on the state and the local ordinance. For the most part, most instances, if you're managing third-party money, so if you're managing your own assets, or if you're working for one individual, you don't need a license. But if you're co-locating, which you shouldn't be co-mingling funds, mm-hmm. but if you're managing multiple funds, for various different owners, then yes, you do need a real estate license.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you were saying something beforehand about your mantra and everything and how much you want to make, and I was thinking is like, to me, success is to know what you want and to get it.
Yeah.
And so what is it you want? So whatever it is you want. So a person can say, well, I want to buy this, I want to buy that. Or a person may say, I have a kid and I need money for college, or my IRA right now sucks, I need some money, or I'm just tired of working, or whatever it may be. So we do certain things, we strive for certain things because of what it gives us. We all know that money is just a vehicle. Money is important, but what is it going to give you? What's the end result? And I think a lot of it boils down to time, free time to pick and choose what you want to do. So I'm sorry, I just want to.
No, and that's important, and in fact, I like that you said that, because for me, it was time until, and it still is, right? Because I do value my time very, very much so. But I heard something that was really recently that was interesting. I was speaking to a young lady, and she said, I asked her why she was getting into real estate. So I do some coaching for people that are trying to get into real estate. And I do some coaching on people that are trying to they've already got real estate, but they're trying to build up their property management companies. So this particular young lady was getting into real estate. She had a really good job, so she was really clear on what she wanted to do. She had trimmed her liabilities over the last 12 months so that she could free up capital and didn't have too much expenses. And she was ready to take that leap of faith. So I asked her the basic question. I said, so why is it that you want to get into real estate? And her why was, she said, Francis, I'm always so shocked that every generation has to start from scratch. She's just recently married, and I think she's about to have kids, or probably close in the near future she will be having kids. And so it could be a thought in her mind of, hey, why does every generation need to start from scratch? And she wants to break that cycle in her family and be able to create generational wealth that she can pass down to her children, who can hopefully pass it down to their children. And that's the beauty with real estate. It's one of those transferable assets that just keeps living and giving.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, sometimes for people like myself who grew up in the inner city, parents didn't have anything. And there they call it long money, where it's generational. But if you grew up in an area where your parents didn't own a home, or they were always renters, there's nothing transferring, there's no life inheritance. And if we can have a whole different discussion about generational wealth. Sometimes we can look at back in the civil rights days where they called it redlining, where you couldn't get a property because, you were Black, you were Latino, you were whatever it may be. And then you just get blackballed. So I don't want to deviate, because I have a habit of deviating sometimes.
Oh, no, that's good though. That's good.
But I think that, no, it's true. So it all points down to, okay, what is it that you guys want? What do I want? What do you guys want? So, good. So I have Francis on to talk about today about physical due diligence, everyone. But before we start talking about that, did I interrupt you on your line of thought, Francis?
No, not at all. I'm ready to jump into the content, and absolutely.
Right. So everyone, when it comes to buying apartments, there is a lot of due diligence that needs to happen. There's financial due diligence. They gotta look at leases, look at the rent rolls, look at the T12s, the trailing 12 months. You have to look at market due diligence and understanding what's the norm. But when it comes to physical due diligence, that's a whole different ball game. It's involved with HVAC, roofers, and the thing about with Francis, because he's been doing it, he's hopefully can share some insights of like top 5 things that we should always be aware of when we're buying a property. And I've heard of times where if I want to buy an apartment, either I can hire a property management and say, well, okay, when I pick up this property, you're going to manage it. Once you come do the due diligence with us, I've heard where someone just says, okay, I'm gonna find a general contractor and then have them walk. I've heard where people outsource to third parties. But the problem that I see, that I've encountered, because my niche is 50 units and less, a lot of people go for the big bucks. They don't really go over 50, or they go 100. I was listening to a seminar, and there was a guy, a nice guy, gave a good presentation on due diligence, and his company takes pictures and does all kind of things, but because my niche is 50 units and less, he's not going to even touch it.
He's not going to touch it, right?
So that means that how do people who have 50 units and less, how do they get around, or what should they do when it comes to doing the physical due diligence on a property they want to buy?
Right. So critical question. And before I even jump into that, you said that there's that sort of middle of the market, the 50 units and below, and that's sort of the untapped market. And this is a call out to all entrepreneurs that see those kind of opportunities, right? So typically, when you look at real estate, the largest size properties, whether it's due diligence, property management, or any aspect of servicing those, 50 units and greater, there are, I call it the big boys and the big girls that are going to service those, right? And then the really small ones are either self-managed, or the portfolio size is small enough where it may not make financial sense for you to even get involved in that. But there's that sweet spot where most people don't get involved in, right? And if you can figure out how to create business within that sort of untapped market, right? That is, it's a call out to all entrepreneurs that look in that sweet spot, because there's not a heck of a lot of competition. It's exactly what I did in Manchester, New Hampshire. Is there was a sweet spot of third-party real estate, third-party property managers. Most people didn't want to manage other people's real estate, especially for residential. Right. So, and it was that sweet spot of that underrepresented market. And I said, wow, there's an opportunity there. It's tough. It's really tough. But how can I get into it and make and profit from that? So that's just kind of my entry into that. I'm going to touch a little bit on all due diligence, but I'll focus a little bit heavier on the physical due diligence. Sure. Right. And the reason is I kind of flows for me the entire due diligence, because I think a lot of times when people see properties, they get hung up on, how do I buy this? And they'll spend so much time on the spreadsheets analyzing it, and by the time they go to buy or put an offer on the property, either it's sold or they make an offer which doesn't make sense, right? So I'm going to go all the way right to the start. First step of due diligence for me is financial pro forma, right? So I'm going to run a financial pro forma on the asset. Now, that whole section is a whole separate discussion, right? I'll give you the basic elements of a financial pro forma. How much is that asset going to make? Right. So you're simply going to have, and there's pro formas that you can get. I have a pro forma, reach out to me. I'm sure, Cordell, you have a version of a pro forma. Bigger Pockets has versions of pro formas. Essentially, in a nutshell, a pro forma is your income and your expenses, right? And then certain key ratios like cap rates, cash on cash return, debt service coverage ratio. So there's some really important ratios that's going to tell you what the property is going to perform like. So pro forma it sounds like a complicated word. All it stands for is projected performance. Not real performance, projected performance. So it's your first step into saying, hey, is it even worth doing physical due diligence on this, right? We want to be disciplined investors. So we want to do our first step being financial pro forma. I want to just evaluate this. Think of a funnel. This is the top of the funnel. I'm filtering out anything that doesn't make financial sense to me. So super important to do that. It's going to tell you based on what kind of returns you want. This is a good asset. one more thing on the financial pro forma that I'll kind of end on that is, a lot of times, it's a philosophical question. A lot of times people, will look at a property and there's a sale price on it. Let's just say it's an open property on the market. Let's say it's on MLS. It's an active listing on MLS. And I'm going to make fictitious numbers here, Cordell. The sale price is $250,000. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, as buyers, we're looking at that. We're running our pro forma on $250,000, and then we're basing our offer on $250,000 or a function thereof, right? I'm going to offer this much less than $250,000, right? But we're not offering it based on the performance of the pro forma. So super important to understand is that whenever I do a financial pro forma, I don't care what they're asking for. I don't even base it on the asking price.
Yeah, you're right. Because when you buy commercial property, you're buying a business. Exactly. Unlike a residential, it's listed for $100,000. I'm going to offer 33% less and just whatever it is and let them fly. But no, right. You're buying numbers or you're buying a business. That's why you have to go in detail. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And this is, no, I'm perfect. And this is where it takes the emotion out. If there's a real estate agent involved in this transaction, right, it can get kind of sticky because the agent's going to push to get the highest price on that, whether it's a buyer's agent or a seller's agent, right? Their primary motive is to make sure that the property sells, and rightfully so. That's their job, right? Mm-hmm. Is to get maximum price. So when it takes the emotion off when you give an offer immaterial of the asking price, because you're saying, hey, my offer is based on the performance of this asset and the financial viability to me as a purchaser, right? Mm-hmm. And take no offense to the offer that I'm going to make. So that's step one for me. The second step was the physical. So it's more about what we're talking about here is the physical. If it passes that litmus test of the financial viability, then I'm going to do a physical inspection. So I do a couple of different physical inspections. The first one is obviously just a drive-through. But once I've gone through and it's kind of checked off the location, the access to schools, depending on the type of building. So if I'm in the B/C range, that's the market that I want to be in from a renter perspective, then I'm going to make sure it's, within all the facilities of what is needed for a B/C property. If my intent is to take it from doing a reposition, so I'm taking a C property and I want to make it a B, am I in a B location, right? Like, am I taking a C property and bringing it into a B physical asset, but I also want to make sure I'm in a B location from the perspective of schools, access to amenities and all of that. So I'll do my quick sanity check on that, do a physical drive-through. But now when I'm going into my actual physical inspection, I'm wearing a couple of different hats, right? So the first hat is I call it basically my contractor hat, right? I'm walking the asset looking for deferred maintenance. Mm-hmm. Right. So is there anything in this property that in the next 5 to 10 years, 1 year, whatever your timeframes are, that are going to be exhausted? In other words, they're at the life expectancy or they're at their maximum life expectancy. So, of course, the main mechanicals, right? The roof, the windows, the HVAC systems, and then I will do a physical walkthrough of the units too. Because if the units are in decent shape, from a visual perspective, but if I get into the internal guts of the apartment and I'm looking at, really old plumbing, really old toilets, really old tub surrounds, then I know when those tenants move out, right, my rehab cost is going to be that much more. My unit turn costs are going to be that much more. So I'm looking for deferred maintenance. That's my first thing. Major mechanicals. That's my second thing. Then after I've worn that hat, my contractor hat, I'm then going to wear my insurance auditor hat. right? I'm going to
Are
play
you
Mr.
by yourself during this process, or do you have a team with you?
Usually I'm by myself. Yeah, usually I'm by myself. I will take a maintenance contractor with me. Usually my own. When I ran my own team, I had my maintenance contractor with me. On occasion, if it's a property that I'm a little questionable about, I may take my insurance agent too, depending on my relationship with my insurance agent. So I might actually take my insurance agent. But I've been schooled enough to know what to look for. So I'll wear my insurance hat, and now I'm going to walk the property from the perspective of an insurance agent, right? Because typically what happens is when you close on a property, you're going to get a binder for insurance. Usually 30 to 60 days after the closing, when it's multifamily housing, 30 to 60 days after the closing, the insurance company is going to send an inspector to do a physical inspection of the property to make sure that it's in compliance with what they're underwriting.
Okay.
And if they start seeing things, I'll give you a quick example. They see knob and tube wiring, right? Or they see fuse panels, right? They're going to write recommendations on your, not even recommendations, they're actually going to write non-compliance items as a checklist of corrections that need to be made. If not, they're going to drop your insurance, or they're going to jack your insurance rates up significantly up, right? So you want to go through from an insurance perspective and look like how an insurance inspector is going to look at that property. So I'm looking for knob and tube wiring. I'm looking for electrical fuse boxes. I'm looking for old plumbing, old cast iron plumbing, and anything that's antiquated where an insurance agent's going to be, slip, and then the slips and falls and all that.
So a question I have is, would the insurance company give you like a form, you fill it out, once you go to the property, give it back to them, and then they'll give you a quote on what it would cost to insure it possibly? Or how does that?
Yeah. So on the initial, they usually just get an address on the initial for closing purposes. They're going to give you an initial. They may have a questionnaire for you, like what kind of electrical, right? And you're just simply answering those, right? So you might get coverage and you'll get bound coverage, but it's contingent upon a 60-day walkthrough of an insurance inspector.
Right. Okay.
So once the inspector goes through and says, "Oh, wait a minute. No, this is not what we thought it was," right? There's a buried oil tank. There is knob and tube wiring. There is, antiquated facilities. We've got to re-up on these, or you've got to correct these.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah. So that's my next step on the physical inventory is going through wearing my insurance hat. My third is to make sure that I do a inspection of the inventory, right? So a lot of times when you buy, let's just say you're buying a 4-family, the listing agreement is going to say 4-family, 4 bathrooms, you have 4 apartments, 4 bathrooms, 4 refrigerators, 4 dishwashers, and it's going to have a listing of all the equipment that you're going to ultimately own at the transaction of this sale. I am going to walk through because I am ultimately buying those 4 refrigerators, 4 dishwashers, 4. I want to make sure that, I'm looking at serial numbers, I'm looking at ages of those products, and I'm looking at relative condition of those, right? Are they near the end of life? And if you're in there looking at those and it's an occupied unit, then likely you're going to be able to hit up a lot of other things, which I'm going to get into next, which is speaking to the tenants. Hey, have you had any issues with this refrigerator? Oh yeah, this is the 4th time I've called the landlord. This thing keeps going out, or it keeps leaking, and that's why if you go downstairs, you're going to see leaks on the unit below. Right, it starts opening up the quote unquote can of worms, but this is a good can of worms because you want to know this as a buyer.
Got it.
Yeah. So from a physical standpoint, that's what I'm looking at. If I get really into depth or I'm questionable about certain things, then I will get like an engineer in there. If there's certain things about the basement that I'm not liking, foundation issues, or I see lolly columns, sort of recently put up there, I may have some concerns with, settling basements or settling subfloors. So I may get people in there for that. But for the most part, if everything looks fairly good, That's it on a physical inspection.
And then let's say that you do your physical inspection and you say, man, all these damages. Do you go back to the seller and say, hey, you going to give me credit on this, or are you going to, let's work something out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm gonna write all of those down. I'm taking copious notes as I'm going through this inspection, right? And my copious notes are going to then translate into, how does this affect the overall deal? Is this something that, hey, this is part of my offer? This was part of my original pro forma when I ran the pro forma.
Mm-hmm.
I knew this was going to be part of it. And then, of course, I'm looking at, sort of from a market perspective, is this something that I can absorb, or is this property going to sell with these conditions at that price, right? If it's going to sell with so for example, property is listed at 250, and that's a pretty good going market, or properties are selling at 270, right? So 250 is like right within below market. But I know, hey, the reason it's 20,000 below market is because also it needs a new roof, which is 15 grand. So the owner was smart enough to, to accommodate for that.
Right.
And it's reflective in his asking price. So I'm going to do a quick sort of sanity check on that. But I'm taking copious notes, and I'm going to translate those copious notes into $1 per line item.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And of course, I'm going to separate out my capital work, right? So these are immediate capital expenses that need to be taken care of, and I'll break those up into, I call it life safety versus long-term improvements. And then I'm going to look more into like beautification, common hallways need to be painted, that kind of stuff.
Oh gosh,
routine maintenance.
And that's all part of pro forma anyway. Typically, you probably put that in there. Yeah.
And when I make my offer, a lot of times I will include that. I'll include a pro forma in my offer so that I'm not offending anyone. And I'll include my breakout of, I usually don't do the breakout of repairs right up front, but I'll do step one. I'll do my offer. If I get kickback, then I'll say the reason for my offer is boom, and I'll include my pro forma. And oh, by the way, if you want to know further detail, it's because of, and I'll take my copious notes and say, just so you know, I did observe that your roof is leaking, and I'm not here to buy a leaking roof. I'm here to buy an asset that's producing income.
Yeah.
Hashtag, how much will I make? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And, that roof needs to be replaced.
All right. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, sorry, go ahead.
No. I'm just go ahead. You're fine.
Yeah. My next one, and these kind of like all mesh in together, is after the physical inspection, I'm going to do an occupancy inspection.
All right.
Right. So my occupancy inspection is, who is my tenant base? Right. I want to meet all my tenants. Right. I want to meet all of my tenants. I want to see all the tenant leases. This is a big part of what people miss, is the expiration dates of leases. Right. I took over a 12-unit building in Manchester, New Hampshire. The owner bought it. It was a 12 or 18-unit building. The owner bought it within 6 months of owning the building, and there was a lot of capital work that he had accounted for. But within 12 months, 6 months of closing the building went 50% vacant. And had he gone through and just done due diligence on the leases, and even just one within the leases, just one aspect of the lease, and that one aspect is, what is the expiration date of the leases? Had he focused on that, he would have seen, holy crow, 50% of my leases come due within 6 months of me buying this building, right? This is an expense that I didn't anticipate, because now not only do you have lost income for them moving out, you have rehab fees for each of those units, and then you have releasing fees to your property management company to release those.
Problems.
Yes. So I'm going to do tenant leases. I'm going to meet my tenant base, speak to them. It's unbelievable what you learn from people when you speak to them. A simple question like, "Hey, Cordell,
yes,
everything good at the apartment?"
No.
That's all I need to say, and it's just going to blow up into a conversation on, well, not really, or well, I've been telling the landlord about this, and so it just it explodes into a great conversation. And I'm also going to look at pending lawsuits. Are there any lawsuits? Are there any potential lead issues? Lead laws are pretty hefty. Are there kids in the building? Is there an ongoing lead inspection or lead violation? Is there an eviction proceeding? Is there delinquencies in rent? Is there behavior-based evictions? I'm going to ask tenant 1 how tenant 2 behaves. I'm going to ask tenant 2 how tenant 1 is, and I'm going to do my cross-functional look.
Do they, when they're selling, do they have to say if they have Section 8 tenants as you're doing your review?
Yeah, it's typically going to state it on your rent roll. It's going to say the source of income. So a lot of times they will say Section 8 and the source of the income. Yeah.
Okay.
And the lease will typically say it too.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm going to ask for a tenant file. For each of the tenants, I do review the file to look at any vouchers that are coming in from, because also if you go historically, even if they're not on Section 8, there could have been periods of time where the tenant fell into trouble and they needed some form of government assistance to bail them out. So I'm going to look and see if those, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Good people get into trouble, but I just want to know historically, has this tenant been employed? Or have they had periods where they've lost their job? Is it seasonal work where, typically in the wintertime, they're out of work and they're on some form of government assistance. So I want to just know all that.
Wow. It's like a person really needs to have a good checklist.
Oh, absolutely.
To make sure nothing gets skipped. Go ahead.
Yeah. And then my final one is verification. So I'm going to run through these again. First is financial pro forma. Second is physical inspection. Third is the occupancy. And my final one is, I call it verification. And this is where I go, it's a phrase that I love. It's trust, but verify. Mm-hmm. Right? When someone says, hey, Francis, you don't trust me? Oh, no, I trust you. I trust you, but I verify. Right. So when you verify, you're just keeping an honest person honest.
Yes.
Right. And that's my I like to be verified upon because I want to make sure that I'm doing my work, and anyone checking upon me, I love the fact that they will verify what I'm doing because it keeps me on. It keeps me as an honest person. It keeps me honest and honorable to my role. So on the verification, I'm just going to give you a few ideas on verification. Bank deposits.
Okay.
So typically, if a person is organized with their real estate asset, they're going to have a separate bank account for that asset. Or they might have multiple assets, but they're going to have one bank account for those multiple assets. Mm-hmm. Right? I would hope that people are like that and they're not commingling rents with their own personal accounts and all that. If that is the case, it's a great way to verify the stated income. So if they're saying, hey, my monthly rents that I'm getting on this building is $3,000 a month, right? Or $36,000 if we're annualizing it, $36,000 a year, it's not hard to ask for copies of bank receipts, deposit slips, bank receipts, or access to the bank statements, and they can black out the account numbers. Yeah. And you just want to say, hey, if it's $3,000 a month, how come I'm not seeing $3,000 a month? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, Cordell, you're going to get people that say, well, it's really complicated. Well, not really. It's a rent check that comes from a tenant, and you go to the bank and you deposit it, and you're going to get a deposit slip. That's as complicated as it gets. Mm-hmm. So verify the expenses, the income, and on the same bank account, you can verify the expenses.
You go back like 90 days? Like how far do you go back?
I'll go back 12 months.
12 months, right.
Yeah, I'll go back. I'll ask for 12 months because it's fairly easy to do a quick sanity check because then I can get a trend. A lot of times I do get pushback from bank statements. A lot of people are uncomfortable with getting bank statements. So I will put it as a contingency in my P&S, right? Okay. Contingent upon bank statements, or if I can't absolutely get bank statements because they're commingling, there's a lot of owners that kind of ran it old school. They have
especially the mom and pops,
yeah, and they just kind of put it into their own checking account. Then I'll ask for tax returns.
Schedule E.
Yeah.
Schedule E returns.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so you can track you can verify not only your income but also your expenses. So you can look at all the checks that are being written out and just cross correlate that with your pro forma.
Okay.
And then one more check that I do is on any utility expenses that they state, I'm going to do a quick phone call to the utility companies, get the account number and just say, hey, what's been the average water usage at this building? Here's the account number. And if I don't have permission to do it, I'll have them, have me on the call and make that phone call. So okay. I'm not an easy buyer. I'm not an easy purchaser. I'm not very much liked by the sellers, but where I don't mess around, Cordell, is that once I've gone through those, I make the financial transaction really easy.
All right.
Makes
sense. All right. Well, I have a question. Like, I know there has to be people out there. I know you mentioned earlier you provide coaching and things like that. But what if someone wants to buy a small apartment, but they need some hand holding on the due diligence process? Does your services include that? Or is it you teach them how, or I'm going to be right there with you, making sure everything is, A-okay? Yeah.
So a lot of what I do, Cordell, is, sort of my kind of 3 tiers of what I do. Is the first tier that I offer is, hey, if you're new and you're getting into real estate, I've created resources, right? The first resource being the Job Plus Real Estate Equals Wealth book, right? I also have that as a bundle with an online video course, right? And it is a soup to nuts course. The course sort of encompasses, I took the 15 years of managing over $40 million worth of real estate. So I get into depth with, due diligence, how to analyze properties, what type of properties to buy, where to buy, how to negotiate with people, how to surround yourself with the success teams. And I give copies of the pro forma. It's my own version of a pro forma. So everything is in that. And so that's sort of my entry level. You get the book and that program. The next level is if you wanted to customize a solution with me. Like I have a client now that is he flips high-end, $1 to $2 million homes in Massachusetts. The agreement or the work that I'm doing with him is he's not getting enough of an inflow of properties. So I've created a funnel for him, and I've created sort of a marketplace for him that people know if they're selling a high-end property in the seacoast or the South Shore of Massachusetts, he is the guy because he's not leveraged. He's well financed. Right. Okay. He's liquid, right? He's got cash in hand, and he's able to move rapidly on an acquisition. So I'll work with someone like that on a strategy. So the point being that anyone who's got a very specific strategy, right? And that's what's super important. If they're very specific on what they want to do. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, Francis, I'm thinking I want to get this. As soon as I hear that, I know they're not sure exactly what they want to do.
You put them in your funnel. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? You're probably likely better off reading the book, getting some clarity on what you want to do. And then when you come to me with a clear strategy, hey, I am looking at properties on the South Shore of Boston or the East Side of Buffalo. This is the criteria I'm looking for, right? I know you've been through, lack of a better word, level 1 of my program. I know you've been through the fundamentals. I like that.
Yeah.
So I'm able to work with you. So I love projects where it's like, I don't like corner people into, hey, I only work with people like this. No, that second level working with me is you have an interesting project as it pertains to real estate, due diligence, analyzing a property, creating a marketplace for yourself, a real estate agent that wants to stand out. Absolutely. I'll work with you on that. Okay. And then my last offering, which is really where my sweet spot is I will work with clients who are seasoned real estate investors that own portfolios, small, probably 10 to 300 units, in smaller portfolios, and they have a property manager or they're self-managing it, but they're dissatisfied with that portion of it, and they want to create vertical integration. They don't want any leakage of income in their business. They want to create their own property management solution. That's where I come in and I go soup to nuts, turnkey operation for them to build their own property management business.
I'm going to be there in a couple of years.
We're going to be working together.
Yeah,
we will build that together on this show.
Yeah, that's what I got to do. Got to believe to achieve. All right. Well, I thank you for your time. How can people get in contact with you?
Okay, a couple of different ways. Instagram, which is how you got a hold of me, Cordell, right? My handle on Instagram is at how much will I make? Hashtag how much will I make? So if you search that, you'll get me on Instagram. I'm on Facebook, Francis Fernando on Facebook. If you email me, francis@francisfernando.com. My website, francisfernando.com. Multiple different ways. I'm on LinkedIn, so I'm everywhere. Just Google my name.
All right. Well, thank you. And we'll look forward to next time we hook up. We can chat and learn from each other. We'll learn from you. I don't know what you learned from me, but I'm learning a lot from you. But once again, thank you. And we'll see you next time, Francis. And
I appreciate it, Cordell.
Cool. And everybody, like I said, go to the website, smallapartmentinvestors.com. I am constantly trying to fill that website up with a lot of content. See you later. Bye.
Take care.
Right.